We will now go to Mr. and Mrs. Schouten, and I believe you will share your time. So you will have the floor for 5 minutes. Thank you very much for being here. And I also, we have 2 photographs that you have circulated to members of our committee, which includes the photos of your son, your late son. Okay, so Mr. and Mrs. Schouten, the floor is yours.
We thank you very much for inviting us here to share our lived experience of walking alongside a child with a terminal illness. And it's our hope that through our testimony today, you'll receive some insight into how to deliberate and what to recommend to Parliament. My wife will begin, and then I will conclude.
This is our dear son, Markus. On February 26, 2021, he was diagnosed with Ewing sarcoma, an aggressive form of bone cancer. After 20 rounds of chemotherapy, 25 rounds of radiation, numerous surgeries, including the replacement of his entire upper right arm with an internal prosthetic, we made the decision with Markus and his doctors to end treatment for cure and focus on quality of life. Markus's care was then transferred from BC Children's Hospital to Canuck Place Children's Hospice. The palliative and hospice care Markus received at our home was focused on addressing his suffering and valuing his dignity. The doctors and nurses knew his days would be short, and their efforts ensured that the days he had left were lived well. Markus wanted to die at home, surrounded by his family, but he also didn't want to experience the intense pain and suffering that he knew would come as his lungs filled with tumors. On what turned out to be his last Friday, Nurse Shanna assessed Markus and said, "His time is short." She advised us to take the window we still had for Markus to be transported to Canuck Place Hospice in Vancouver. With the increased intensity of his care, we agreed. Our whole family was together at the hospice, and as we entered the evening, it appeared that Markus would only last a few more hours. As each of his siblings said goodnight to Markus, he told them he loved them and said, "See you in paradise." Mike and I didn't sleep at all, but took turns sitting beside Markus. The nurses maintained his medication, and Markus assured us that he was very comfortable and not in any pain. At one point, he said to me, "This is how I hoped it would be." As dawn arrived, we realized that God had another day in store for Markus. Early that morning, Markus's friends arrived at the hospice, and together they cried, laughed, and prayed. That afternoon, both Markus's sets of grandparents also came to say goodbye. By early Sunday morning, Markus was non-responsive, and his breathing had become a lot more shallow. Just before 2:30 that afternoon, Markus's breathing slowed, and with each of us around his bedside, he took his final, peaceful breaths.
Markus died just 6 short months ago on May 29th, 2022, only 15 months after his diagnosis. If he was here today, his appeal to you would be to not expand euthanasia to minors for 2 reasons. Earlier this month, it was reported in the news that CAMAP, the Canadian Association of Maid Assessors and Providers, is recommending that physicians have an obligation to bring up medical assistance in dying with patients who meet eligibility requirements. As Jennifer just outlined, Markus met all the eligibility requirements. This means that if euthanasia is extended to minors, the day will come when families just like ours, with their dying children, will feel an obligation to end the suffering of their child by having a doctor euthanize him or her. Dear committee members, we recommend against the expansion of euthanasia because by giving some minors the right to request, you put all minors and their families in a position where they are obliged to consider. If that happened to Markus, the message he would have heard would have been clear. We don't value your life. We don't think it is worth living. And if you want, we can end it for you. It would have said to him, "We are giving up on you." Honorable members, we should never give up on our children. The second reason we recommend you don't extend MAID to minors is because by doing so, you eliminate unimaginably beautiful experiences. When we went to the Canuck Place Children's Hospice, we didn't know how long Markus would live. We hadn't even wanted to go to the hospice initially, but being there allowed us to embrace each moment we had with him and him with us. If euthanasia becomes available to minors, then that Friday night when we thought Markus was going to go, after we'd all had our time with him to say our goodbyes, it would have seemed like the thing to do, right? It's time, the nurse would say. It's the compassionate thing to do. He doesn't have to suffer anymore. But then we would not have had Saturday, a most beautiful day, shared with our son, our brother, and our friend. We suffered much with Markus, and we miss him terribly. But Markus showed us. He showed us how to find meaning in suffering, and he was thankful for each day that God gave to him. And therefore, it is our heartfelt recommendation to this committee on behalf of Markus and our family that you do not extend May to minors, and instead focus on providing the necessary, robust, palliative, and hospice care resources to ensure the best quality of living, even when someone is dying. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the Schoutens for your courageous testimony this morning. I cannot imagine being in your shoes, but the fact that you were able to share this testimony with us was very powerful. So we'll go into our first